my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're live with Expresso, and your timing is perfect because we're about to head back into the wild. South Africa is home to some of the most amazing animals in the world, and we love it. And one little creature that makes sure our flora is always in tip-top shape is the African honeybee. And bees, I think, maybe have a bad reputation because of their little stingers, but they really do so much for our ecosystem and our biodiversity all year round, in fact. And Rowan Feldman from Sambi is here to shed some light on these busy little bees and what makes them so special. So Rowan, just be yourself today. Just all I ask is just be yourself. Rowan, thank you so much for joining us. I love this segment because we get to delve into the nuances of species that we rely so much on. And I think people often overlook the fact that bees are a key member of the ecosystem. One thing I have to ask, obviously being in the middle of winter, are they less active in winter? Do bees actually hibernate? How are they when it comes to the seasonal shift in their behavior?
So honeybees don't hibernate, but they do become less active in winter, just like humans do. And they're very dependent on what's flowering. So in the summer rainfall areas of South Africa, there's usually not much flowering in winter, but in the Cape, the winter rainfall area, there's actually lots of things flowering, and there is then food for them, and they're active.
So how do they go about sustaining their existence then? Give us a picture into their winter ecosystem. How do they survive the long winter months?
So basically in the wild, the honeybees have to find forage sources. So it depends a lot in where that swarm is actually located. And then our beekeepers, they actually keep the swarms and move them to more favorable places if they need to. So that's basically the big difference between what we call a wild honeybee hive and a managed honeybee hive.
And you begin to understand how important beekeepers are then in maintaining that ecosystem. And of course, they're part of a production line because we love our honey and we love the variants of honey that South African has to offer you. When you think about your fynbos, all those sorts of things. So obviously from seasonal changes, we understand that's something that genetically they were obviously imprinted to deal with. Climate change is something else, and we're starting to see incredible new kind of manifestations of climate change, not just in South Africa, but globally. How is the current climate crisis affecting bees on a grand scale?
So basically all the natural patterns are just becoming messed up, and you have more extremes, more erratic events, and basically this is just causing changes in the environment, and it depends how well the honeybees can adapt to this.
We're going to get into that question a little bit more specifically in terms of areas of South Africa and how, for instance, the Knysna wildfires, the fires that have obviously been now raising funds for those victims of those fires today, along with Good Hope. But I'm really interested in looking into the nuances, the differences in the various species. And we'd love to hear from you if you've got any questions as well. 021 430 9881. You should have it on speed dial by now. But Rowan's going to stick around. It's all things bee related this morning.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
So we're continuing with our Into the Wild chat this morning. We've got Rowan Feldman here talking all things bees. And we have got Lucille on the line from Cape Town. Very good morning, Lucille. How are you doing? Lucille, just be yourself this morning. How are you doing, Lucille? Oh, we just lost her, but it gives us an opportunity, I think, to get into a fairly serious subject matter when relating to our ecosystems at the moment. You know, we are United in Hope this morning, along with Good Hope FM. We're going to be putting on a concert for the victims of the devastating fires in Knysna. A lot of conversation about how it's affected humans, but I would imagine biodiversity in that area has taken a massive knock. How have the fires in Knysna affected the bee population?
So if I just take it to the beekeepers again, the first was just the destruction of their hives, which you can think is also very traumatic for them. And then the second part is actually the forage. So the plants that was the food for the bees is just gone.
Oh, it's scary stuff, and we certainly send all of our thoughts to everyone in that area affected. It sounds like we've got Lucille on the line now. Lucille, are you there?
Hi there.
Oh, very good morning. Thank you so much for weighing in. Do you have a question or a comment?
I've got a question regarding bees.
Yes.
My neighbor has bees in the cavity of her walls. So when it's hot, it comes out and it's a disturbance to me as the neighbor. And my concern is that my kids are 18 months old and 2 months old. What can I do regarding that? Because now I need to close my doors and bring them in.
I think this is something, thank you so much for that. Lucille, I think a lot of people deal with this sort of situation. It's very difficult to control a hive when, especially, and it seems to me that bees pick a spot that they really like.
Yeah.
So what would attract them to cavities of walls, first of all? Why do bees keep coming back to make a hive in that place?
So basically, the honeybees are looking for a perfect place where they can regulate the temperature of their nest. So this aspect of the house, the height, all of these things get taken into account by them. And in the case of Lucille, I would suggest that she gets a beekeeper to actually come and remove that hive because it's just too close for comfort.
And that's the thing. I mean, bees aren't naturally aggressive, but there are certain situations. Obviously, if you're going to smoke a hive, they will respond in such, and they will want to defend their home space. Is there a way that we can keep bees out of our house in that essence, or do you have any tips in terms of bee safety when it comes, especially with small kids?
I would say just keep an eye out in your garden, for example. If you have an old owl box, it's disused, often bees move in there. And if you have removed the bees, don't put another owl box in there. They'll likely reuse it again because it's a good spot.
They've gotten onto a good thing. But thank you so much, Lucille. Just be very careful out there and have a chat to your neighbour. I think that's essentially what you've got to do, and get a beekeeper in to find a new location. So we're talking about the devastation of the Knysna fires, what that's meant for the beekeepers. What knock-on effect does this have? Because obviously it's a massive bee population. Is this something we should be concerned about?
So generally, if there's no food for the bees, there's just a low population. And because we, as humans, we're so dependent on the honeybees. In nature, they're generalist pollinators. They're important for lots of plants. And then for the pollination of our crops, South Africa is growing more and more pollinator-dependent crops. And if we have shortages of honeybees, these things are not going to be pollinated.
It's simple as that, and that knock-on effect, I think people are already feeling that. But we'd, again, love to hear from you this morning. If you've got any questions, we've got a fountain of knowledge here in the form of Rowan. So give us a short call, 0214309881. We'd love to hear from you.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back as we head back into the wild. We are talking about the African honeybee with Rowan Feldman, who has really been a fountain of knowledge, as I said earlier. You know so much about this incredible species, but I think what is really blowing my mind is how important it is to the bigger ecosystem. And when we look at the global perspective at the moment, there seems to be a lot of stories surfacing at the moment of a decline in the bee population. Is this actually happening? Are we seeing globally a decline in bees?
It's not a universal pattern. Some countries like the USA have experienced more marked declines, but in other countries, for example, they're increasing. But there is definitely a tendency that populations are more and more under pressure just because of more and more built up area, less natural resources. So it's getting tougher for bees out there.
And I would imagine for beekeepers as well.
Yeah.
Is there a massive difference in terms of how bees react to climate change, to their environment, between what we find here in South Africa, the African honeybee, and European bees or other bee species that we find?
I would say our African honeybee is definitely more robust than European honeybee.
Yeah.
We have lots of wild populations still. This is a huge bonus because they sort of keep the managed honeybees nice and vital. There's lots of gene exchange between the two. And our honeybees are just generally more resistant to things like disease.
I love that, which means we need to protect them even more. The Cape honeybee, and we know that we get some of the most amazing honey because of the fynbos and
Yes.
the factors that come in. How different is the Cape honeybee to the African honeybee, or is there no difference?
So the African honeybee occurs in the summer rainfall parts of South Africa and further up in Africa, whereas the Cape honeybee only occurs in the sort of this fynbos biome. And it's locally adapted. It can fly under windier conditions, slightly lower temperatures.
Understandably so,
it's really adapted for the Cape conditions.
When you have to look at the bee population in an area like the Cape, because we obviously have this massive honey production down here, and with, as I said, all these lovely flavor influences, how much of that bee population is wild and how much is controlled within the beekeeper space?
Well, that's a good question. We still don't know to this day. And it's quite difficult to survey. You can ask the beekeepers how many they are keeping.
Cultivating,
That's
yeah.
not an easy information to get. And then we're still looking for some high-tech method to actually go and census wild populations and determine how many there are.
And I suppose by virtue of the fact what you said about our species being so healthy and those that are within that beekeeper space genetically being strong, obviously is a good sign that we've got that influence from strong wild bee populations as well. We'd love to hear from you again, 021 430 9881 if you've got any questions relating to the honeybee. And we're going to get back into a subject that Lucille, our caller, opened a little bit earlier about their behavioral patterns. I'm going to ask you a question you can think about. Are bees naturally aggressive, and what would make them aggressive? If you want to weigh in on that conversation again, give us a shout, 021 430 9881.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Creatures, we are talking about the African honeybee, and we've got Felicity on the line right now. Very good morning, Felicity. How are you?
No, I'm extremely well, thanks, and how are you?
Loving the conversation this morning. Finding out some absolute gems about the African honeybee. Do you have a question for Ruan, or maybe a comment that you want to weigh in with?
Yes, I do, thanks.
Go for it, yeah.
No, I'm extremely well, thanks, and how are you?
Good, thanks. What's your comment or question?
I want to find out how to treat a bee sting, because, I visited Robben Island. I was seated, and the bee crawled on me and crawled under my, behind my knee. And it stung me. I kept still, and it stung me. And I pulled out the sting immediately. And I reacted terribly thereafter. So I want to know, how do you treat a bee sting?
Rowan, I know you're not a medical professional, but this is your zone. Felicity, thank you so much. I think, again, a lot of people can relate to that. Any suggestions there?
So there's an old saying that you should use a table knife and just sort of scrape the sting out, because if you pull on the sting, there's actually a bag of poison at the end of it, and when you squeeze it, you're actually pumping it, you're injecting it into your...
Have you come across any remedies or how to approach it? Because I know everyone's going to react differently. I was allergic when I was a young person. Now,
Me too.
I barely feel a bee sting.
Yeah.
Anything you would suggest on the treatment side?
It would differ from person to person. Some say cool the sting down, others say heat it up. I can't really advise on that.
First things first, get an antihistamine on there as possible. And if you are reacting badly, Felicity, I would really suggest that you speak to a doctor about the possibility of you having an allergy towards the bee sting venom. And that poses the question. I know bees don't naturally want to go out there and find someone to sting. That sting is there as a natural defense mechanism. Are bees aggressive, or what would make them aggressive?
Some hives are definitely more aggressive than others, but as a general sense, when you start disturbing around the hives and the sort of bees get the idea you're trying to mess with them, they will launch a counter-offensive. Yeah.
An aerial assault. That begs the question then, if we do find a hive in our garden, there is something magical about knowing that you've got a garden beautiful enough to attract that kind of ecosystem, but it can be dangerous, especially with young children who do have, I think, a higher rate of allergy when it comes to bees. What do you do?
So if you have honeybee hives and you feel you just can't live with it, it's too risky, I'd suggest you go on the website sabio.org.za, and that is the National Beekeeping Industry's link, and they have a list of all the beekeepers associations across the country, and there you can go and visit them and get certified beekeepers that you can phone, and then they'll come and collect the hive. And often there's a nominal charge from the beekeeper.
Lastly, if I can ask you to leave us with one thought, because this is obviously a space that you are very passionate about. For those of us out there that are wanting to do more for our environment, wanting to do more for local populations, how important is the bee species in our ecosystem?
The bees are incredibly important in our ecosystem, and humans, like we depend on the services they provide to us, we also need to care about them, because we don't really have a replacement if something happens to them.
I absolutely love that. Rowan, you've been amazing this morning. Thank
you
so much. Really have represented your organization brilliantly, and the little species that is the African honeybee, and loving the fact that we've got species particular to Cape Town as well. So go out, protect this precious resource.